Welcome to Tower Technicians. What if you could hang out with experienced tower technicians, industry leaders, and decision makers? Ask them about their experiences, habits, concerns, and frustrations. Then, take an insight or two to guide your own career growth. Each week, Darren Wagner shares an in-depth look at the lives of people in wireless telecom who are always working hard to close the digital divide. His hope is to show you how you can stay safe, grow your career, and reach your fullest potential within the industry. DW is an experienced tower technician who has become an industry leader over the last 3 decades. His goal is to bridge the gap between tower technicians and decision makers within wireless telecom. Now, here's DW.
Hey, what's up, everyone? And welcome to the show that's designed to address the gap between industry leaders, contractors, and the workforce in the communications infrastructure industry. And so this week's title is Why Me? Meaning, why am I the guy to do this podcast? I started thinking to myself, this is kind of a risky move to put myself out there and do a podcast and go public with myself. And then I started thinking, you got all of these people in the industry and everyone's looking for someone else to step out and get some work done and find some solutions and make some things happen for positive change. So I start evaluating my experience and I think, why not me? Because my experience is relevant. When we start talking about my experience, you'll see that I could relate to several different aspects of the industry. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But the question is, why not me, right? I have the courage to step out. I have the passion to make change in this industry. And I want to give back to the industry that has served me for a long time and given me a really good career. So why not me? So let's get into my experience. So I was born in a place called Chalmette, Louisiana, which is a little bit east of New Orleans. And I was born back in the early 70s. And Chalmette is a blue-collar community. And my family was all blue-collar workers. All of the influences in my life have been, workers that have worked at either plants or manufacturing or construction or some sort of any of those type of trades. And so, the biggest lessons that I've learned coming up have been from blue collar influences in my life. I grew up in a divorced family, and my dad was the parent that took care of me and my sister for the most part growing up, which was pretty much unheard of back in that time. So we had some struggles back in the day, just because our family wasn't the same as everyone else back during that time. And we're talking about, the mid to late 70s and the 80s. So single dad, blue collar worker. He worked at a plant for most of my childhood. And then I had, uncles who worked in construction and also worked in plants. And I had a grandfather who worked in construction. He worked in plants. And then I had a lot of family members that were fishermen because Chalmette is a fishing community as well. So again, a lot of blue collar influence. Another part of my life growing up was sports. Sports was a big deal to me. It's where I learned how to not only contribute to a team and work as a teammate, but also I learned how to be competitive and not only competitive on team sports, but individual sports as well. I ended up getting into endurance sports and I competed in triathlons and long distance racing and stuff like that. So it helped shape me for who I am today. And a lot of my hobbies back in the day had to do with construction. I was always building something, always fixing something, around the house, and as a family, we're always, working on something, some kind of construction, whether it's at my house or one of the family members' house. Another thing I did was work on cars, and I got to the point to where I was working on not only my vehicle but my friends' vehicles. And then I got to the point to where I was installing car audio. So all of that was hobbies that I did back when I was, a kid and teenager and growing up. And it kind of molded who I am today. Well, after I got out of high school, I joined the military. It was the Army National Guard. And the reason why I joined the military was because I wanted to go to college. And my dad at the time didn't have the means to be able to pay for college. And so I had to do that on my own. So I went and joined the Army National Guard and learned a lot of good lessons in the Army National Guard, and taught me a lot of discipline and how to be a man and take responsibility. A lot of good lessons. And then when I came back home, I went to college, started going to college, and that's where, I learned that this world is tough. I was out from under my dad's wing, and I decided to go out on my own, and I'm in college now and working in a full-time job as well. And so I was working for Sears Automotive, going to college and studying to go into the medical field, and decided pretty quickly that the medical field wasn't for me. I ended up deciding to advance into a career that was more in line with what I liked, and that was electronics. So I decided to change my curriculum to electronics while I was in college, and I also started working for a company called Radiophone. This was the first carrier that I worked for. They started off with pagers and car phones back in the day, and we're talking about the mid-90s at this point. I'm working for this company called Radiophone. I'm still in school for electronics, and I started doing car installations, and that ended up evolving into me getting promoted to be doing component level repair and working on circuit boards, because that's what I was going to school for. So Radiophone was the first carrier that I actually worked for, because they ultimately started had a cellular network that they did. They started off with paging, but then grew it into a cellular network. So worked for Radiophone for a little while, and then got into with a company called Primeco. And Primeco was a company that ended up becoming Verizon. And so this was the second carrier that I ended up working for. And I worked for Verizon as a technician. And, I ended up going to different cell sites and working on the equipment at cell sites, all of the base stations, and troubleshooting antennas and all this stuff, and worked with tower crews to climb towers, and I learned a lot at Verizon as a cell technician. And then I ended up moving up into management and became the regional operations manager. And so when I did that, I was actually over hundreds of cell sites, multiple technicians. I had 20-something technicians that I was responsible for, and I also oversaw a few switches as well. So it was certainly a good experience for me to learn the technical side of networking. And so did that for a while, and in 2004 decided I'm gonna start my own thing, go out and start my own company, because I felt like I've always had the entrepreneur spirit. I've always been someone who likes to do things outside of the confinements of a big corporate atmosphere. So I decided to start my own company. And so in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, that's right around the time when I was starting my company. And it set me back a lot. And I got a slow start. And so during that time, it was pretty tough to start my own company, but I did it. And at that point in time was when I decided that I was in an industry that I had some experience in from the carrier's perspective, right? And I knew what it was like to operate as a carrier not only on the network itself, but we also contracted subcontractors and contractors to work on our network. So I had some experience with dealing with some of the contractors, and we also worked on the construction part of it while we were building out the network. So we were involved in that as well. So I had some relevant experience. And so it gave me the confidence to start my own company, which at the time I thought I was equipped with the knowledge that I needed to function as a company. Looking back, I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. So, so fast forward 2005, I start my own company. I kept it small for a long period of time. But during that time, I told myself one thing, that I would never ask my employees to do something that I wasn't willing to do. And so I was faced with a challenge. And that challenge was, if I'm going to have technicians that work on cell towers that climb hundreds of feet in the air, and I'm not willing to ask an employee to do something that I'm not willing to do, that meant that I would have to get my ass up the tower and start climbing. And so when I started my company, that's what I did. I had to figure out how to overcome the fear of heights. And I had to get up there and work with the guys. I started hiring technicians and working with them. And I actually learned from some of the best technicians in the area on some of the different networking and components of the industry that it takes to run these networks. So I'm working on these networks, and I had just started my company, and I'm hiring technicians, and I decide I'm going to start climbing with these guys and start learning this role in the industry, and make sure that I'm not asking my employees to do something that I'm not willing to do. And during that time in my life, I figured out there was something that I had to overcome that I had never experienced before. And throughout all of my experience prior to this, I had been a pretty good technician, a pretty good worker, and I picked up things pretty quick, fast learner, pretty good with my hands. Whether it was installing car audio or installing car phones, or whether it was, circuit board repair, or whether it was working on base stations at Verizon as a cell tech, or even working with the network technicians as a manager at Verizon, and as in the switches as well. I was always pretty good at my job, but I never had to face something I faced when I started my company and started climbing towers. And there was a sense of fear. I never had to fear for my life when I worked at all these other jobs. Now here I am, started my own company, and now I'm climbing hundreds of feet in the air because I committed to myself I wouldn't ask employees to do something that I wasn't willing to do. But there was a sense of fear that I had to overcome. And I started doing this job as a tower technician. Even though I owned the company, I was a tower technician for a long time, working side by side with all these guys. And during that time, I had to overcome this sense of fear. And now looking back, I'm excited when I climb towers. I'm excited because the thing that makes it exciting is that fear, is that rush that you get, the excitement. It's exciting because there is that sense of, if I don't do something right, if I don't tie off properly, if I make a mistake, it could cost me my life. And so there's always that sense of fear, which allows for some respect, right? You got to respect the job. You got to respect the people who do that job. And so I learned a lot of lessons when I started my company, and I'm working side by side with the technicians that I hired. And it was a long process for me to learn the tower technician aspect of things. And so over the years, I grew the company, and at some point, we ended up hitting a tough spot. The economy went south. The company wasn't profitable, and I had to go seek a job somewhere else. So I ended up going to work for Ericsson, and went to go work with Ericsson and became a construction project manager at Ericsson. And I oversaw a project rollout that consisted of several hundred sites, the construction of several hundred sites. And I did that for some time until, but I still kept my company open. And once the company got back healthy financially, I left Ericsson and went back to my company and started operating my company again. But that time at Ericsson was a good experience. First of all, I got to understand what it takes to work for an OEM. You know, working for an OEM is a different perspective than working for a carrier, which is a different perspective than working for a contractor. And so I got to experience that. And so it was a really good experience. I got to meet a lot of good people. Some of my best friends today in the industry stem back from me working at Ericsson. So I did the Ericsson thing for a short period of time, but then ended up going back and working for myself and my own company, and kept it small for a long period of time, but always still went out into the field and worked side by side with the technicians. And then a few years back, I decided to grow the company. So I started investing some money, going out and getting some financing, and started growing the company. And we've grown it to the point to where now we're in multiple markets, and we have multiple carriers we're working for and multiple tower owners, and we're doing pretty good at this point in time. But I'm not done yet. I'm not done. I'm definitely not done. So I have my company, and I could sit back and be comfortable and not have a worry in the world. But I feel like there's still some work to be done. This industry is such a great industry. Society depends on this industry so much that I feel like I still have something to give to this industry. So I'm at a point in my career where I'm going to give back to the industry that has given me such a great career. And so that's the reason why I feel like I'm the guy for this podcast. You know, when we talk about why me, it's because I could relate to the technicians, because I was a technician. I could relate to the contractors because I was a contractor. I could relate to the industry leaders because I worked for multiple industry leaders, 2 carriers and an OEM. So I have that experience. I have those relationships, and I can relate to their perspectives. And so that's why I feel like I am the guy. I am qualified to be able to do this, and I have the passion. I have the passion to step out. Look, I know there's going to be haters. There's going to be people that criticize me, and I'm ready for that. I get it. You know, I'm not going to go into this thinking that there's not going to be people that don't criticize me. I'm prepared for that, especially, when it comes to social media. You know, when we're talking about posting things on social media, I expect the criticism. But at the end of the day, my heart is in this. I'm truly trying to make a change in the industry. I'm truly trying to find solutions for positive change. And that's why I feel I'm the guy for this podcast. So I hope you find it interesting. You know, this is episode 2. There's going to be many, many, many episodes, and they're going to get better and better. But I felt like this episode was a perfect opportunity to at least introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my experience, what brings me to this podcast, and why I'm the guy to be able to facilitate the information that's going to be delivered to you on a weekly basis. So, hope you enjoyed this one. Look forward to many more to come, and I appreciate you guys listening. So, if you enjoyed it, I need you to do a few things, and I call it S2R2. I need you to subscribe to this podcast, whether that's on Apple, on Spotify, or wherever you listen. I also need you to share it with one of your friends, someone who you think is going to be interested in it. And then I need you to to leave a review. So, and last I need you to do is leave a rating, okay? S2R2. Share, subscribe, rate, and review. So I appreciate you guys. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.